Good morning, everybody who's been able to join us so far. This is an unprecedented happy hour because normally we run them in an afternoon slot, and therefore I think other than Julia, who is joining us from Australia, who may have a drink to hand, we don't encourage any alcohol at this time of the morning. But joking aside, we're really delighted to hold this and host this happy hour, which actually is our second of the week. Again, unprecedented, but something so important that we wanted to bring this to you before our series closes in a couple of weeks' time. The focus today is very much around using data and AI to help transform the housing and care at home. And it's something that actually emerged in our Tuesday happy hour when we looked at the future of supported housing and how we need better intelligence to help prevent and be more proactive in the way we deliver care and support and enable people to make better decisions in their homes as they age of all ages. So it gives me great pleasure that we're able to continue on that theme and dig down a little further with a fantastic cast this morning, supported by UKRI, and we've got colleagues here from the Business Connect, as well as the former colleagues who Julia Glenn, but also a new sponsor of the LIN UK from HCR Law. So welcome, David, who you'll be speaking later. But somebody who I've known well, and Kate, you and I have met several times, and this has really been pinned around your fantastic work that you're doing to look a bit more at that Everon and Howz partnership and how we're going to take that forward and support you through the LIN on that. So without further ado, I'll come back later, but I think, Pete, you want to say a few words, and you're co-chairing this morning with me.
Yeah, Jeremy, thank you. And appreciate that intro. So good morning, everybody, and thanks for joining us today in a session that I hope you find really interesting. So very briefly, what I'd like to do is just give you an overview of Everon Group. For those of you that don't know us, we are a leading provider of digital cloud-based technology solutions designed to support safer and more independent living. We operate across multiple European countries, mainly Finland, Sweden, as well as the UK, helping local authorities, municipalities, housing providers and care organisations move from traditional analog telecare to flexible future-proof digital services. And as I'm sure you're all aware, the Nordics are well advanced in terms of the adoption of digital. So the technology that we brought to the UK is very much tried and tested. Our mission is simple, and it's to enable people to live safely and independently for longer wherever they call home. And we do this by combining robust open technology with a strong focus on partnerships, as you will see today, integration and person-centered outcomes supported by the intelligent use of data, so a fully connected approach. Here in the UK, Everon is at the forefront of the digital transition. We provide scalable end-to-end platform that supports everything from dispersed alarms, sensors to solutions within a group living environment such as sheltered accommodation. As I keep saying, our solutions are fully digital, end-to-end. They are cloud-based and built to integrate with a wide ecosystem of devices and partner technologies. Crucially, Everon UK is not just a technology provider. We work closely with commissioners, providers and frontline teams to design services around real people in real homes and with real challenges, whether that's supporting hospital discharge, preventing avoidable admissions, or enabling people to remain safely at home. Our focus is always on outcomes, not just devices. I won't run through our customer base, but we're actively supporting members of the G15 in their A to D switch, providing a totally managed service model. And that brings me to our partnership with Howz, which is the main focus of today. And it's a key part of our vision. The Howz solutions utilizes advanced activity monitoring and insight platform that uses data from everyday routines, such as movement around the home, use of appliances, and patterns of day-to-day living to build a picture of what normal looks like for each individual utilizing standard Everon hardware. Our partnership with Howz is so important because it combines the strengths of both organizations. Everon provides the secure digital infrastructure and service capability, while Howz brings powerful analytics and behavior insights that turn raw data into meaningful actionable information. So together we can move from a reactive alarm-based services to proactive and preventative care. And that means for the people that we support, we can often spot earlier in incidents that may need an appropriate intervention. And I'm sure Kate will provide more information around that. So I think this is a good time to hand over to Kate, and thank you all again. Thank you.
Thank you, Pete, and welcome, Kate. Great to have you with us this morning.
Yes, thanks, Pete, and thanks to you, Jeremy, as well. And yeah, HousingLIN for inviting us to share what we've been working on with everyone. So Pete's already covered the broader context, but I just want to add a little bit more about how machine learning and AI fits into the project. At Howz, our role is to understand daily life within the home as in as unobtrusive way as possible, and to then understand when there might be a change in that well-being that we can inform somebody of so that they can get in touch at the right time. And understanding that behavioural change really is an important part of the service, and we use machine learning in that function to detect that change in behaviour. That's critical really because it's a well-known kind of clinical indicator of correlation between well-being change. So there's extensive evidence that change in mobility can correlate with increased risk in falls. Also that disrupted routines can worsen cognitive decline or things like depression and anxiety. And also, everybody knows that correlation between bathroom activity and UTI is well known. So that's where machine learning comes into the picture of this Evercare project in terms of accurately tracking well-being signals and identifying something that needs attention. And then once that change has been detected, that's where the AI comes in, because you need to then articulate those changes in a way that people can work with easily and clearly. So it's about turning that insight into clear, actionable summaries that people can adopt in their lives without too much friction. I should make clear that this isn't about replacing people's judgment, and it's not about either like removing support. It's about enhancing information, using AI to enhance information and filling gaps, really. So with that as a foundation, let me explain the collaboration behind Howz and Everon on Evercare. So Everon produces a digital pendant, which is the picture. It's a wrist warm alarm with an inbuilt accelerometer for fall detection. So this device already offers the familiar emergency alarm, fall detection, but importantly for our work, it also sends a continuous stream of data activity. So it's a constant stream with a score of how active that person is being at any moment in time. So what we wanted to explore together was what we could achieve if we combined this data stream from the Everon pendant with Howz's machine learning and AI functionality. So could this same device, already worn by thousands of tenants, also provide the proactive insight to enable that kind of early intervention? And also then we wanted to understand whether that data set that we got out of it could be rich enough to track change in routine, but also change in sleep, and then fuel the AI patterns that Howz has built to ultimately spit out those insight reports at the end. So that was the Evercare proof of concept that we set out to test. And so in order to kind of go about that, we put in place a very structured and rigorous program. So the first thing that we did was to take the continuous stream of data from the pendant. And as I say, unlike traditional telecare, it does send a minute by minute signal, which is something you can only get kind of with that kind of digital transition. So we firstly validated the pendant data against third-party data for accuracy. And this was, I think, perhaps the most critical point in the process, because we needed to make sure that the scores that we were attributing, the change that we were detecting was accurate. And Howz have a wide number of different data sources that we use to understand behavior and pattern of life. And so we used an alternative data source as a comparison, but then we also used qualitative research in order to establish from the users how they were experiencing life as well. And so once we'd done that, we analysed the movement patterns and the changes over time, and we modelled day-night structure using the sleep algorithm within our machine learning. And we applied our change detection algorithm to understand kind of deviations from someone's normal routine. And then we passed all of that through our AI summary tool to turn it into the kind of clear, actionable report part. So that kind of gave us a reliable basis to assess whether meaningful insight could be drawn from just this pendant data alone. And the results were very promising, which is why we're here. And I think importantly, they really mirrored the insight gathered from the other data sources and the qual research closely. So we were immediately able to identify clear day-night patterns and how active someone was at different times of day, and then to detect the changes over time. We also identified nights of disrupted sleep, which we know link strongly to falls risk and wider well-being changes. And critically, we were able to then convert that data. It was rich enough for us to take those complex machine learning outputs and then pass them into the AI systems through a conversion method using heat maps to generate the kind of clear well-being reports. So all of this by combining Howz's machine learning AI with everyone's pendant to then produce those kind of change, sleep, well-being insight reports that I was mentioning earlier. So, like, the technology around the pendant and the analytics underneath Howz are both very sophisticated, but the process to bring them together is actually quite simple from a provider point of view. The pendant sends the minute-by-minute data report. We import those points and run them through our kind of pattern of life and sleep algorithms. We establish the routine and then convert them into structures that are readable by the AI, and they then use that to produce the clear summary of what's changed. And so, yeah, with that clear working flow from start to finish, we had validation of the Evercare project. So, which was to establish that this kind of proactive and predictive insight that the market at large is really talking about, the adoption and the use of, is actually achievable without additional hardware or a sensor suite. It can be drawn from equipment that's already widely accepted and it's already, part of an existing digital telecare procurement plan, basically. So what does this mean in practice, especially in housing settings? So I've popped some stats on the slide there about the correlation between sleep and fall risk, not least because I always find them quite shocking every time I see them. But, there are so many different ways that sleep is an indicator of potential risk in falls and change in sleep. Not enough sleep, even too much sleep, correlates with that increased risk of falls. But there's also a really important part of care optimization in here too. When housing and care teams can see these patterns early or are also able to see not just changes, but worrying behaviors or lack of worrying behaviors, it allows them to decide where to focus attention. It allows them to decide when to check in and how to adjust support, basically. So one example shows this perfectly. In a project in the south of England, housing team were concerned that a resident might be wandering at night, and night care was being considered. So by looking at this kind of insight through Howz, we could clearly show that they were sleeping normally. And so the night care wasn't needed. The funding went to somebody who genuinely required it. The family were reassured and staff could prioritise their time more effectively. So this was just kind of a very basic level of why just understanding this kind of data from this kind of watch in this digital transformation that we're all going through is really important, game changing. This is kind of the objective, proportionate insight that supports independence and reduces unnecessary interventions and care, basically. So I'm pleased to say that this kind of proactive insight is being pulled into services. But I think what we've established now through the Evercare project is that you can get this level of insight from this pendant alone, which is quite cool, I think. And I hope reduces the barrier to adoption as well. So what does this all mean for future planning and commissioning as we prepare for the digital switchover? So I apologise for returning to that old chestnut after sharing something cool, but we kind of have to because it's the backdrop for all of this innovation. I think the key message from me here really is that this digital switchover moment, it's not just about tackling an enforced technical upgrade. It's a moment to think differently. You can take the opportunity to investigate how digital technology can tell us more about daily life at home, what people need, and how we support them to stay independent for longer. So digital telecare like this has the potential to do far more than just be a like-for-like analog replacement. So yeah, with Evercare, we've shown that it's possible for providers to procure digital alarm, fall detector, proactive insight in one device. So we're saying that this technology transformation is actually an opportunity to do something meaningful. And, you know, this Evercare project is just one example that we've developed together. But I think what I'm sharing it with you for is evidence of the kind of impact that machine learning and AI can deliver to you alongside the digital services you're bringing in as part of digital switchover. And ultimately how they can allow you guys to provide better care and support for the people who need it, really. So, yeah, thanks everyone for listening. Hope it was interesting. I understand that we'll be sharing the white paper from the study after this event. Please feel free to get in touch with myself or the Everon team if you'd like to find out more about the approach to this study or the findings that we had. Cheers.
Hey, thanks very much. A really informative presentation, some really great information there. But also, I think for me, it's not just about the AI and the predictability and what you talk about the earlier. It's also the types of outcomes that can be then delivered, both in terms of the service provision, but also critically for the beneficiaries of that, whether it's sheltered housing residents or somebody in their own home who may have a concern about falling or any other aspect of their activities of daily living. And I'm sure that's something we'll touch on both in the Q&A panel, but also where Julia, David Hall and David Calder may have some reflections as well. So without further ado, I'm going to forward on to our colleague who is in Australia. And I see England just lost another wicket, Julia. So,
Oh, I didn't know. I didn't know that because I'm here.
So, thank you very much for joining us and getting you away from listening to the Willow, but perhaps just as well.
Okay, I'm going to thank you, Jeremy. No, my pleasure. I'm just going to share my screen. And if there is a bit of a lag, Sally has kindly offered to step in, but hopefully you can see my screen. Great. Okay, so I'm going to dovetail nicely with the topic that Kate was talking about, and it's very interesting to hear about that project. So I'm going to talk a bit more about AI and predictability, and I work over a number of different projects. So what I'm going to try and do in this next 10 minutes is talk about some of the really interesting and empowering role predictability models have in terms of the benefits of AI, and also some of the pitfalls from my experience. So if there are people kind of in the audience who are thinking of using their data for predictability models and to build out some, hopefully this is a bit of advice. So very briefly, there's some basic principles to provide some context that I want to share with you. And I think this is really, really important when thinking about using AI to increase your impact or indeed increase your bottom line value. So machine learning, as Kate was talking about, is broadly there's two branches. So there's supervised learning and unsupervised learning. So predictability models are largely concerned with supervised learning techniques. So existing data sets or existing data is given usually human-derived labels and then is used to predict outcomes from that data and from those patterns. Conversely, unsupervised learning has no human bias, you could argue, because unsupervised learning techniques largely look for patterns in data and use only mathematical logic to find those patterns. So there's no kind of human labeling or human intervention. So in my experience, when thinking about predictability, it's very good to also overlay with unsupervised learning techniques so you can be sure that you are not building in bias or generalization. So in terms of how AI is being used in health and social care, in terms of this discipline of predictability, something that is very commonly being built out at the moment in terms of a health and social care context is classification models. So classification models use supervised learning to predict a category or outcome that a new case is most likely to fall into. So from past data that has been labelled, so past data that describes a particular problem domain like falling, like hospital admissions, or increased need of care, past data is used to predict how a particular person or group of people might in the future need the kind of intervention that they might need. So it's about supporting the human decision-making process with understanding what kind of outcome group a person might fall into. So classification models have become possible because of the maturity and increasing longitudinality of lots of different data sources. So obviously we have adult social care data, we have technology-enabled care data. So we have now a plethora of data that describes how people live independently at home, using sensors, using fall risk interventions, which is the project that Kate was talking about, although obviously that's much more sophisticated. And then we also now have NHS England data that looks about hospital activity data and readmissions. So we have this multifaceted data that informs very individualistic patterns about people living at home on their own and being supported by technology. And we also have kind of broader social intervention data that provided in an adult social care context and also in an NHS context. So these planes of data enable much more predictability in terms of building these classification models. And it's these increasing sets of data and their maturity that has enabled this kind of birth of classification models used in LA local authority and social care contexts. So I've got a couple of examples here just briefly to talk to. So these are quite interesting because they are using this AI discipline of a classification model. So Wolverhampton Council are using predictive models on health and social care data to see who is likely to be readmitted in terms of a person who has left hospital but might need more care, and what kind of care pathways and volumes are emerging in the future. So this predictability gives councils and local authorities support in terms of analysing risk and demand, in terms of what kind of procurement and brokerage decisions are needed in terms of community support, reablement and intermediate care. And of course, by extension, demand for supported living or sheltered housing or domiciliary care. Worcestershire County Council have a Pathfinder project, which is another supervised learning classification project. And they, interestingly, have combined the three different data planes of assistive technology in terms of in-the-home telecare data, adult social care records and NHS data. And this is to explicitly understand what their investment should be in technology-enabled care in the home with the goal of extending independence, which I think is obviously quite a positive goal if it's about extending independence so people can stay at home longer. And there's some other examples here that I won't go into for the interest of time, but it's interesting to see that UK-wide local authorities are getting behind these classification models to determine risk and demand. So that is the story of classification models, but and this is my opinion, where I believe AI could be increasingly deployed to add further value to these classification models is by using model overlay to de-risk the classification techniques. So in my experience, there are some typical problems with classification models. And obviously, as our data sets become broader, better curated, more representative, and more longitudinal, some of these problems can be reduced. But classification model is useful to inform classification modeling is useful to inform human decision making, but it definitely can be prone to overgeneralization, human bias, and representation problems. And I think one of the biggest points, and it was great to hear Kate talk about how they combat this by using lots of qualitative data to put the human back in the loop, is that classification models can ignore latent or unseen dimensions in data sets. So by that, I mean subtle nuances which effectively could dehumanize the human sentiment or the human need behind a predictive model. So this is where I think there is a huge opportunity in terms of AI modeling and predictability to improve classification models by using unsupervised learning techniques to critique those models and using model overlay to ensure that the human is in the loop and that you have a person-centered outcome. So there has never been a better time in terms of open source data sets that reflect real human aspiration in terms of what people want in terms of their independence in later life. And there's never been a better time to start looking at these data sets using AI to help inform decisions for housing and social care. So HousingLIN obviously have their housing preferences survey, the English longitudinal study of ageing, and the adult social care survey. All of these provide excellent sources about people's preferences for how they'd like to live as they get older. So just very quickly to finish, as a real world example, this is a project we did in 2022, and it was using an ELSA data set and then using a set of supervised learning markers to try and classify frailty and who in that data set might be classified by an AI classification model as frail. We then took that model and overlaid it with an unsupervised learning clustering model, and we found out that the same data subjects actually had an incredibly active digital online life, an incredible strong digital agency, being members of lots of different social clubs, lots of intergenerational activity, and that nuance could very, very well have been lost had the worldview relied on the first classification model. So my conclusions are that in context of predictive modelling, AI can provide significant opportunity to better understand risk and demand in terms of providing care and support options in later life, but always use with care and use other AI techniques to critique them and put the human back in the loop. So thank you for having me, and I hope we haven't lost any more wickets whilst I've been talking. Jeremy, I'll pass back to you. Thank you very much.
No, I don't know, but personally hope that Joe Root is hitting his first 100 in Australia as well, but that's for another conversation. But Julia, just to reflect on what you've said before I hand over to David Hall, you ended up by sort of putting the sort of consumer, the citizen at the heart. I couldn't agree more. It's something that we in the HousingLIN believe is central to the way we approach things, and it's something we term co-production, and it was formed very much part of our TAPPI project, the Technology for an Ageing Population, which was cited in the Older Persons Housing Taskforce that you referred to. And thanks ever so for referring also to the Innovate UK funded work with Ipsos. And indeed, AI is playing an increasing role in better understanding the preferences at a local level. And anybody who joined us on the Tuesday happy hour this week will know that the Supported Housing Regulatory Oversight Act also will be requiring local authorities to have much better data about the needs and preferences of all ages. And it's something that the LIN's been working with Innovate UK to take forward. So really great plug. Thank you very much. But also the context of personalisation and co-production, which it was great to see, as well as the examples. Lots for us to learn from. Thanks ever so. And I hope you managed to get a little bit more cricket while you're in Australia. David, there's been a couple of observations and comments in the chat box and Q&A, and some of this also is about thinking about the legality, about privacy, around protection, consumer protection, but also around how we protect data and the like. You're going to be looking at this from a more of an ethical sort of point, a social legal point. So over to you, David.
Thank you very much. That's right. And I'll talk at quite a high level, so don't leave. I know I'm a lawyer, forgive me for it. This is not a law lecture. It will hopefully be a really complementary counterpoint to what we've heard so far. It's fascinating, isn't it? AI technology offers so much promise, and the government, successive governments, have been rightly cautious about putting dampers on the innovation and the opportunities that we have. And the law, the current position of the law and the ethical dimension reflects that. As I say, I'm going to talk at quite a high level, really at the level of legally driven ethics or ethical factors rather than law per se, but I'm happy to get technical in the questions if anybody fancies that. So I mentioned I'm going to give a bit of a counterpoint. Certainly I have heard some key words and phrases in the session so far: unobtrusive, actionable, very much focused on functionality, output, benefit, and digital transformation, and rightly so. These are the reasons why we want AI. They help us to grasp all of these fantastic outcomes. What I'm going to outline for you is an informal framework. It's made by me. Knowledge of a practitioner with 25 years experience and lots of experience in advising on AI. So hopefully it counts for something, but I wanted to give you something that you can take away and that you can apply in practice. How does it counterpoint? Really because the legal ethical dimension pushes us to consider a broader platform of factors and to bring into focus some of the points that Jeremy raised from the Q&A. The little framework that I've established for you starts at discover, there at 1 o'clock. Discover, protect, conform, comply, contract, yeah, I am a lawyer, and inform, getting into the privacy thing. So I'm going to take you through each of those in turn. We'll begin at the beginning. So discover, what do I mean by that? Good practice and legally driven ethics require us to carry out due diligence in relation to AI. We need to understand what we're dealing with. At its most basic level and at the initial stage, this means fact-finding and risk assessment. So how does the product work? We found out a little bit about that in the earlier sessions as part of this webinar. But if we take a legal ethical position, we're looking not just at functionality, outputs, benefits. We're also looking at the technology under the bonnet, the hardware layer. What is it? Where is it? What's the software on top? What's in the stack? What data does it need to ingest? What data is it going to output and who can see it? What resources is it using, and what's the overall cost of use and the cost of ownership? How do you need to prepare your data in readiness for AI? I would recommend edging into this, particularly if you're new to AI as a commissioner. Use pre-market engagement. Go into something like the open procedure or a direct award with great caution. Because what is required from a legal ethical perspective is to understand the market for the technology and the particular solution that you're planning to buy. Sometimes pre-market engagement and so forth and dialogue-based procedures might not be sufficient on their own. We've heard in the preceding sessions in this webinar about quick proofs of concept tests, essentially, ideally with users and ideally with a representative catchment of users, old people, young people, people that are at risk of falls, for example, people that are not, staff at all different levels in the staffing, and involving partner organisations, local authorities working with social landlords, working with NHS and other health providers, and working with the wider voluntary sector. Quick tests with a broad base of users, fail fast. Work out if there's something there, like Kate at Howz did with Everon. If there isn't, drop it to save the budget and move on and try something else. So that's discover. It's about interrogating and not taking at face value the benefits or being blinded by factors such as functionality and allowing that to take our gaze away from other important legal ethical factors. Next item, protect. Protect what? Well, the ethical dimension leads us to think about protection of data and other valuable information. We've talked about personal data already, but AI uses all sorts of information from various different sources, some of which may be from within our organization and some of which will be from third-party sources. Have we got the permissions in place? Are we allowed to use the data? If so, on what basis? What are we permitted to do with it? And let's protect our own data as well. So we will almost certainly be pumping some of the home data of a local authority or social landlord or partner organization into AI for it to use. Let's make sure that that's protected and mutually respected, particularly when we're working in partnerings and particularly cross-sector partnerings. Your customers, your staff, and other data subjects, to coin a legal term, people in relation to the data relates to and who can be identified from the data. Julia very helpfully focused in on the risk of bias and other risks, such as being blindsided by the data. The data contains lacunae, gaps, which skew the outputs or skew the decision-making process. So let's discover that that is happening as part of the discovery phase and take mitigating steps, measures to address the bias and the gaps. Protect the AI itself. Let's not trust that the black box is always going to be there. The hardware can fail, it can be attacked. The hardware can be subject to all sorts of side winds. AI is not deterministic. We've got used to IT that is deterministic. You ask it what 1 + 1 is, and it tells you 2 because it's good at arithmetic. AI isn't quite like that, and you can't necessarily rely on AI to give you the same answer today that it gave to you yesterday based on the same data sets and circumstances. But crucially, and thinking about scares that have been and incidents that have been in the news recently, let's make sure that the AI will be there when we need it. This is about business continuity. it's about IT continuity, and it's about security. And your transformation plan, let's protect the people. When we introduce machines like that, I think it was Julia that commented that in the context of a digital transformation, when the new functionality comes in, that is going to have an impact on how your staff and other people in the supply chain and your tenants and other service users, it's going to affect how they live and how they do their work. And these things will need to be worked through in order to protect their sense of value and their clarity about what their role is within the organization or the community that they operate in. Next item, conform. This is where we really get into the legal bit of the legally driven ethics. Julia touched on needing the difference between supervised and unsupervised AI. The law really puts some emphasis on this, and from an ethical perspective also, we talk about supervision and observability. These are non-deterministic machines that to some extent can be allowed to make decisions or certainly to provide information that humans will then act on. So the law and ethics, good practice, require us to ensure that where personal data is being used by the AI machine, the machine is not left entirely on its own. There must be a human in the loop where personal data is being used, and that's a right that is enshrined in the law. But of course, from a risk and compliance management perspective, we will want AI to be observable. We will want to be able to supervise its outputs, check its steps of reasoning, and consider its sources and decide whether or not we agree with it. Data sovereignty is the next point that we should consider in the context of conform. Where in the world is the AI? And therefore, where is our data? Where is our data subjects' personal data? Where is our IP? Is it on shared infrastructure, or is it on private infrastructure behind a firewall, as it were? Who controls the infrastructure, the technology, and the machine? Who has access to it? Where are they in the world? Are they in trusted jurisdictions? Because the law trusts some jurisdictions, doesn't trust others. Is compliance, next point, built in to the machine or the way that it's deployed for your organization and your service users? Again, from a legal ethical perspective, there is a formal, a mandatory requirement for compliance to be built into the machine. So is the machine set up so that it is possible for us to enact and stop the machine working in relation to a particular person if a right to object is exercised? Are we able to comply with a request for somebody to provide them with all of our personal data about them? And do we meet the basic security standard that's set in GDPR and the Data Protection Act? And if it's applicable to you, and it might be if you're using health data, NIS, the Network and Information Systems Regulations, and in due course, the Cybersecurity and Resilience Act. Data and IP notices. I talked about respecting each other's IP and respecting other people's data. That will cause us at a minimum to acknowledge other people's assets, intellectual assets and their data, and it may require us to obtain permissions from them, documented licenses. So that's conform. Comply. I'm going to conflate that with contract because that's very much how I view it. And I have an eye on the clock and I want to leave lots and lots of time for questions and for my subsequent colleagues on the panel. When I'm thinking about compliance, I'm thinking about contract, ways of locking in compliance and managing responsibilities, liabilities, and other risks. So to comply, we need a contract with the main supplier of the AI technology. And we should also seek, this will take us back into the discover phase of my little framework, we should also seek visibility of the terms and conditions that apply to other technologies that are there in the stack. from the hardware layer and the infrastructure layer through the software stack to the functionality that we're interested in. Those contracts should allocate responsibilities fairly, and so should be scrutinized, because often they're kind of skewed to the interests of the party that provided the terms and conditions. As commissioners, you should be looking to ensure that your commercial and compliance risk is managed to an acceptable level under the contract. There are some steps in relation to compliance and contract that are mandatory. So we need to carry out data protection risk assessments and make sure that they are documented. They should help as part of our discovery and protect phase to flush out risks and concerns and help us to bring them into focus so that we can identify management mitigation strategies. It is mandatory where the AI is using personal data for us to have processing contracts in place. And it's a very good idea to have processing contracts in place in other circumstances as well. And if applicable, again, if health data is somewhere in the mix, we should be thinking about mandatory clinical and data risk assessments such as DTAC. Finally, inform. Tell people. So we've gone through a discovery exercise. We've worked out who and what we need to protect. We've worked out our conformance positions and the measures that we need in order to conform and how to lock those down in, using contract. Then we need to tell people what we found. And I recommend, I recommend acknowledging the risks, particularly if you carried out a proof of concept or some kind of soft test or alpha or beta test. Acknowledge the risks and explore them openly within the closed group that you're trying out the technology with. Communicate some measures, define some measures, and then communicate them to meet the risks that you've identified. Prepare privacy notices if you're using personal data, because they're mandatory. And it can be really difficult to understand what data is coming into the system and what the AI is doing with it and how to articulate that to an older audience as opposed to staff with varying and particular skill sets. And last but not least, provide them. It's all too common to document some privacy notices but not provide them, or not to lock in the measures and mitigations that they refer to into the technology and into the organization and the way that it interacts and uses and benefits from the technology. So implement them and provide them. I hope that's helpful. Let's move on to the next step in the panel.
David, thanks very much. And I really feel that was a very clear presentation and made a lot of clarity around this. And the only blip was your slide predicted it was going to move on, and it appeared slightly earlier. But I'm also struck by a David Bowie track about space oddity, you know, thinking about future space age technology. Well, actually, we've now got a housing normality of AI and data. And this is very much built in, not just to our care and tech platforms, but also building management systems. And we're going to be looking a little bit more at that in the next sort of 10 minutes or so as we sort of whiz through some of the questions that have come in. Thanks ever so much for everybody who's contributed with questions. We'll go through those, particularly the ones that have been upvoted, in a minute. But also, can I just say, great set of presentations, setting out, you know, the practical, the vision, the strategy, the Evercare model, relating it back into different aspects and how people, perhaps in local government and others, are applying that through the work that Julia was sharing with us. And I think then coming back and wrapping that round in your virtuous circle, David, was really a great way of bringing the formal part of the presentations to a close. So I'm just going to go through the questions first of all, we've got sort of various questions from Julian. Is there any data that shows that some people live more predictable lifestyles while others are much more random in their actions and activities? Does the work pick up this personal variation, and are some people more difficult to understand in terms of behaviours? I wonder, Kate and Pete, if you want to sort of reflect on that first.
Sure. Certainly, it does pick up on personal behaviours, and obviously there's vast range of differences with individuals. But what this service is designed to do is to pick up those differences and highlight the need for appropriate interventions. But certainly, yeah, not everybody behaves the same way.
Yeah. And Julian also asked about something also about wearables. What happens if people take devices off? And again, are there how to look at sort of different fail-safe mechanisms? Any other uses of sensors and how it complements other activities, including hands-on care and support?
No, absolutely. And in fact, we're just about to launch a service where there are no wearables, but using optical sensors to detect exactly what we've been describing. So, yeah, and of course, even in traditional telecare, some people don't wear their pendants all the time, and that is a potential problem. But obviously, we've got to move towards non-wearables. In fact, the Howz technology incorporates a lot of non-wearable technology, such as smart plugs and PIRs, etc. Tomorrow, so there is a mix out there, and we can deliver very personalized solutions.
Kate, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we've done on the kind of differentiation between a clear pattern and not. We've done a huge amount of work in the past with Dementia Research Institute, looking at people with accelerating levels of dementia. And this is one particular area where you can see stability of life really starting to change, particularly around day-night pattern. You can see that kind of, it really starts to, the structure starts to evaporate. And so we've spent a lot of time training our machine learning and AI to understand what is a safe threshold and what isn't, and make sure that we're only really providing those insights where it is clear and there is that distinction. And we've got, confidence thresholds built in as well as verification thresholds to make sure that we're only determining pattern of life if there is one. And of course, with all these kind of technology, there are times when it's okay to live independently at home, and then unfortunately the time comes when they're not. And when that kind of day-night pattern does tend to disintegrate, that's sometimes an indicator of that.
Thanks, sir. David Calder, David Hall, or Julia, any thoughts on those opening questions?
I think Julian is absolutely right that obviously as people we can't all be predicted in the same way, and I think it goes back to the good discipline of using lots of different AI techniques to examine your problem domain, because then you find the deltas that don't fit in. You find the points where you need to look at the problem differently to understand it properly. So he's absolutely right, and that would be how I would go about it, is approaching the problem using lots of different algorithmic techniques to see the areas of difference.
David Hall, I can see you nodding to that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd just add that this takes me back into my Discover segment in my virtuous circle, which we will now agree to call it. I think it's about understanding what the technology can do, and to some extent you've got to roll up your shirt sleeves and start using it. Do a POC, a proof of concept, get into a soft trial with a closed group of people, so you can try it out, see what data you can bring into the system, start to experiment to define what insights you can extract from it, work from there. And you will find when you commit to that sort of process, answers to these kinds of questions very quickly. But coming back to Julia's point, define the problem first, focus on the problem, and then find the solution.
Yeah, that's great. Kate, there was a particular question, I think, earlier on for you, which is about the type of data, third-party data sources you use, whether that's something you're able to share. And again, David, there's something about who's the we that will be supervising in the AI. So, Kate, let's start off with you.
Okay, so Howz uses behavioral sensors as the same with many people. So motion sensors, door sensors, smart plugs to build that pattern of life around the home. So that's something we're extremely familiar with. We deploy in many councils. And so that's our base benchmark for any of these kind of data source comparisons is how does it stack up with that 360-degree view that we're used to. In this particular case, we also used additional verification from an Apple smartwatch, because it provides that kind of health packet as well. So we wanted a third level of dimension. And as I said, there was the quality of research, the getting that kind of deep human view as well was really important.
And thank you very much, Kate and David.
So who is the we who will be supervising the AI? I was thinking very much of subject matter experts. So when you're training the AI or starting to work it into a use case and applying it, you will be embedding some, you'll actively be using some human knowledge in order to get the AI to work out what outputs you want, and working out how, from a human perspective, the subject matter experts would piece that together using the data. So it's those subject matter experts that ideally you're going to want to be involved in the build and the proof of concept stage, checking the logic. Checking the AI's working from the source data that it has available, each step of its logic, so that piece about observability, all the way through to the actionable data output. But that's through the build stage. Once you've got something that you're ready to put into active use, if the use case is that you're using the AI to augment individuals' ability to make decisions or to identify points of need, then some element of supervision is likely to be required there as well. So at the point at which the decision is about to be made that a service user or tenant needs a phone call or some other intervention or somebody to pop around, a human to consider the insights that the AI is offering, the suggestions, and to apply human logic and expertise to assess whether or not we agree.
Oh, that's very helpful. Look, we've got a couple of minutes left, and I just want to flip over to the web chat because actually somebody's put a very interesting question in there rather than in the Q&A box. Rajiv, really great for you to join us. Lovely to catch up with you again. And he said it's a very interesting conversation. He had a couple of thoughts. The first was around data silos, and are those issues and issues around being able to generate insight from wristwatches and other medical, so perhaps also have interoperability around some of that. And the second point, which may be an issue with David, or may also be Pete and Kate in particular, and Julie also, if you've got any insights from this, be welcome, is securing informed consent of the users and related data privacy an issue, or has this been addressed? So Kate, Pete, do you want to kick off, and then we'll go back to the wider panel?
Yes, sure. Data silos is a problem, but there are huge steps being taken, especially by ourselves internally, to develop a platform that is completely open and able to push and pull data from various data sources. One of the reasons that we partnered with Howz was the fact that we had a common interest in interoperability as well. So that's huge for this industry. So we want to become an agnostic supplier, and I talked about integration earlier, but certainly bring in the right partnerships together to deliver or to enable more views on more holistic, personalized care is absolutely key. But around, Kate, do you want to talk about the pilots that we're running and around how we're securing the data around that? I mean, everyone is a 27001, and data is absolutely paramount from our perspective and protecting that data. But we use anonymized data as part of our day-to-day living. And you know what we're talking about here. Somebody mentioned earlier about canary care and just check-in. Absolutely, two great solutions. But what we've got here is the ability to integrate the Howz solution, those analytics, along with our traditional digital model of care within sheltered accommodation and dispersed alarms, but being able to switch this service on and off, which is unique within the industry. But Kate, do you want to talk more about?
Okay, I'll keep it quick because I've got an eye on the time. But yes,
yeah,
so
sure.
we have 3 programs going live with this Evercare solution. And in terms of looking at the kind of the data silos, I think, Pete's spoken to that beautifully. But for me, it's also about connected care. It's about, why do you want data in a joined up place? Well, you want care joined up. You want the experience for the care delivery teams, but also the users to be joined up and, seamless. So it's about, if you have the care through and the data capture through the pendant, as we're doing with Evercare, then that automatically connects into an ARC. So you've got that, alarm response, but baked into it. And then with the enhancement of the sensors and the rich data that we're getting off the back of that, we're looking at how that can then be passed into care platforms. And searchable within those care platforms, really. So I think where you're going to see the direction of travel around all of this stuff over the next 18 months and what we're doing with these 3 programs that are going live is about integrating that insight experience right the way through the care delivery experience, including through with care teams as well.
Thanks a lot. Julia and then David, any final thoughts before we sort of wrap this up?
Super quick one, if I may. Really interesting question. Going from the back, the second limb, is securing informed consent of the users and related data privacy an issue? Yes. So whenever you're deploying personal data as part of an AI, as part of a solution that uses AI, as the controller or the processor of the data, you need to be thinking about the legal basis upon which the data is used. Consent is one of the options, but there's a wider menu. And you're not always and not necessarily forced into relying on consent. There might be other legal bases that you can rely on. So that's an item to take advice on, really, and it'll be different from project to project, use case to use case. The first one, data silos, massive problem. I've advised a lot on multi-party local health and care record projects within the NHS. And it's difficult for the NHS even to manage documented and compliant data sharing between different kinds of trusts, mental health versus acute, for example, let alone them working towards documenting compliant arrangements for data sharing with partner sectors and organizations, social landlords, local authorities, partners in the third sector. So there are ways of doing it. There is a lack of consensus. It's quite heavy going, and the challenge is the compliance piece and the consensus around that, not the technology. As you've heard from Pete, tech is there, it's ready. One final thing on that, I understand that the NHS, as part of the, it was announced as part of the Life Sciences Plan and also touched on in the 10-year plan, they are talking about centralised data sets for patients. The data follows the patient. The extent to which social landlords, local authorities and so on integrate with that, TBC.
Well, Julia, if I can hand over to you, because I think you also shared some examples where this the consent is there, but also about how it works around a coherent partnership.
Yeah. Well, it really is worth doing regular searches for open source, well-curated, anonymized data sets, because the great thing about that list of longitudinal curated data sets that's growing is that you can use them to be your own critic. Like, if this data set tells you one thing, well, what does this data set tell you? And particularly if you think about how the dimensions combine. So you're looking at data harvested, if you like, by in-home sensors, but comparing that to human surveyed data and then comparing that to, say, adult social care data, you've got 3 really interesting dimensions as an example. So keep an eye on open source anonymized data sets, use them to complement and critique one another and critique your own sense of the problem domain.
Well, look, on behalf of the HousingLIN, everyone and Howz, can I thank you very much for joining us this morning? Can I thank all our speakers for their time? We've had, as David said, a menu of different things, and I hope you've been nourished with all the ingredients on AI and data. It's something that we will be taking forward in the LIN, not just from a telecare and a care orientated, but also how it links into broader building management systems and the development of much more intuitive homes for people as they age, as well as people with long-term conditions. If you are interested in that, please join us for our future happy hours. Next week, we're actually looking at dementia and dementia friendliness. And so, again, Kate, that may touch base with some of the things that you've been talking about. And also thinking beyond that, how we can ensure more care ready and digi ready. In the housing world, we've been very familiar with the term every decision about care is a decision about housing. I actually personally think we now need to reframe that. Every decision about care is a decision about housing and technology. So you heard it here first. Please join us again. Can I thank all of you for your wonderful presentations? Can I also thank Sally and the team behind the scenes for putting on this earlier version, an early morning version of the happy hour, and we look forward to resuming at our normal time next Tuesday. And please watch out for the Ever On Evercare Kate's white paper due out shortly. Thanks, everybody.